Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to The Only Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Vanini, joined as always by TheOnlyColors.com managing editor, Joe Toohey. We're here to recap Michigan State's 37-24 win over Western Michigan, preview the Oregon game coming up this week, and some other happenings. Joe, how are you doing? We're recording this at night, but how are you doing at this time?
I'm doing well. I'm getting excited for the Oregon game. I just rewatched actually the Oregon game from last year and the Western game from last week. So
Cool.
I'm starting to get pumped up.
Cool. Now I know that this podcast is called The Only Podcast, and in some recent weeks, some podcast competitors have sprouted up over at the Lansing State Journal and former TOCers. KJ and I think
Jim McAvoy.
I think Jim's doing it too. So I recommend you listen to as much as you want to, but just remember this one right here is the only podcast. Those others, you can listen to them, but they're not podcasts because this one's the only podcast.
Yeah, make sure you're subscribing on iTunes as well.
Yes, it's good that we say that at the beginning of the show instead of the end like I always do because I always forget. Subscribe on iTunes or the RSS. That way you get it automatically downloaded. It's easier to listen to it that way. I listen to a lot of podcasts on my phone, and it's a good way to do that. And we figure we do this. We record this Wednesday night, so you got kind of Thursday and Friday to listen to it because usually by 3 days later it's. People don't really care to listen to it anyway. So I figured this type of schedule gives us enough time to look back at Western and enough information to look forward to Oregon. Now, Joe, I guess we'll start off. You went to the game. You were in Kalamazoo. How was your trip?
It was good. Yeah, I thought Waldo Stadium was a pretty good venue. It
looks really nice. For a MAC stadium, it looks pretty well put together.
Well, the cool thing about that stadium is that Kalamazoo is a very hilly city,
right,
and so they kind of build it into the side of a hill to a large degree. So it's pretty nice. And in the corners of the end zones, there's a big hill and trees and stuff like that. So they used to sell tickets so you could just sit on the hill there, but they don't do that anymore because it's a fire hazard, I guess. But yeah, it was a good trip. The student section has issues at Western like everywhere does, so that didn't fill in until about the end of the first quarter. Eventually it did fill in though, which was good to see.
How big? It's that whole sideline, isn't it?
Yeah, pretty much. I think there's one section that isn't students on that whole sideline.
How would you compare it available seat wise to what MSU has? I think MSU's, I want to say 13,000, I think. I mean, how did it look just based on your eye test?
It's probably less than that just because the stadium overall is probably only 30,000. So It's not the entire one side anyways. There's still one section that's not students. So, but yeah, it's probably somewhere, just below 10,000, I would think. And Western students can get into that game for free. So sort of interesting to see.
Although for this game, I believe they had some sort of ticket lottery because of the demand. So that I'm not sure if that factored into who showed up when, but I don't believe it was just first come first serve for this game, which might have affected things.
Yeah, I think you're right that they had a lottery, but I heard that the lottery actually didn't fill up. Like they didn't have enough people sign up for the lottery that would fill the student section. So yeah, that was an interesting just feel for the game was. But the students who were there were fired up, and but I would say that Central filled their student section significantly more full than Western did.
I gotcha.
In 2012 versus this game in 2015.
I gotcha.
But the fireworks at halftime were pretty cool. They had actually a pretty large fireworks show at halftime, and I was glad to see that the band traveled. So I got to see both the MSU and the Western band play at halftime, which was cool. The other cool thing was that for the team to, at least for MSU, to get off of the field into the locker rooms, they had to cut off pedestrian traffic through the concourse. So while I was, out of my seat at halftime, I got to see the MSU team kind of, gearing up to go out on the field for the second half, which was kind of cool. And it's always amazing just to see how big those dudes are, up close like that. So,
Where were your seats? Like,
so I was,
your view.
yeah. So from the TV view, I would have been in the left end zone, sort of in the corner.
Was that an MSU? Was there an end zone that was an MSU section, or was that?
Yeah, I got my tickets through the athletic department. So yeah,
Okay.
that whole end zone pretty much, and then a good chunk of the side you couldn't see on TV was green and white. So I would say that it was probably, I don't know, 65-35 or 60-40 in terms of Western to MSU fans.
How'd that compare to Central?
I think it was pretty similar actually. The fact that Central had like a really full student section, I think helped. But the thing was that Central game was a 3:30 kick instead of a 7 o'clock, and I think that helps a lot in terms of getting students there.
Yeah, and that was a Saturday. This is a Friday.
Yeah,
might have people with classes, or you might have people going for the holiday weekend. It could be a lot of factors, but what did you think of the? What was your take on the game from where you were at?
So it just kind of seemed like they got to a point when the game was at 34-10, and the MSU team just kind of hung it up and kind of mailed it in the rest of the game. On the second watch, it looks that way too. I mean, the play calling just gets really vanilla, and looks like Connor Cook is sort of going through the motions instead of, really playing hard. And he sort of echoed that post game. There's a quote that said, "We moved the ball when we wanted to," which is a little concerning. But yeah, I mean, that's sort of what it looked like the whole game. There were a couple of plays that Western nearly broke that would have had a pretty big effect. There was when the game was at 20-7, there was a wheel route.
Yeah, Braverman drops that one. And that's a sure-handed guy too. He had 13 catches for the game. To drop that touch, I mean, they really dropped kind of 2 touchdowns in a row. I think almost back-to-back plays. I believe the other one was Davis, who Corey Davis, the Western receiver. That guy's going to play in the NFL. That guy is really, really good, and MSU just could not cover him very well. I mean, they got the interception at the end when he kind of looked like he got confused on the route or something. But they had 2 big-time receivers there in Braverman and Davis. And, yeah, MSU did get a break there with Braverman dropping that touchdown.
Yeah. So, but other than that, I mean, I don't think I really got anything else from being at the game that you wouldn't have gotten by watching on TV. It was, yeah, I mean, nothing else really stood out while I was watching in person that I didn't get sort of on a second watch. But yeah, it was still a fun trip, and it was cool to see Kalamazoo. I mean, I've never seen tailgating like that in Kalamazoo. It was packed everywhere, which is pretty cool to see. And of course, yeah, I mean, they were prepared for it. I'll give them credit for that. Like, they had buses running to and from sort of a parking lot they had relatively far away, but it was interesting to see sort of how they handled a crowd that large. That's
cool. What I guess going through it, what was your biggest takeaway from MSU? I mean, good, bad. What stuck out to you? To me, it was the MSU running backs, which were a big question coming into this game.
Okay, so Chris, you got to pick one. You gotta pick a team. You got to pick which one of the 3 or 4 really. If you can be Team Delton if you want to. You have to pick a team.
I was on Team Delton. I really thought he was going to be the guy to eventually take control of it. But I mean, I know it's Western Michigan, but after one game, all 3 of redshirt freshman Madre London, I think Gerald Holmes is a sophomore, and true freshman LJ Scott. I mean, it's hard to go. I mean, after one game, it's hard to go wrong. London averaged 4.5 a carry. Holmes averaged 6 a carry. Scott averaged 5.9. I think from MSU's perspective, that had to be the biggest positive coming out of that game, and that you didn't just have one guy run the ball well. You had 3 guys run the ball well, and the offensive line is probably the best in the D'Antonio era, at least among the starting 5. It's not as deep, I don't think, as the past couple, have been. But when you look at what this offense it can do, wants to do, some creative play calling by Dave Warner, especially on that on London's touchdown run. It was a very cool counter play.
So you totally evaded the question. You didn't pick a team.
Well, I mean, I guess I can't. I guess I'm not going to be on Team Delton because I just think there's too much ahead of him now. Among the three, probably go with London. Although you're going to see multiple guys. Obviously, Scott brings the power that the other guys don't. I guess London, but I mean, what are you?
So on second watch, I'm all in on Team Scott. I think so. Not to take anything away
a lot
from
of people were by the end of that.
I thought London and Holmes were both very good, and they would be totally serviceable running backs, if not very good running backs. But to me, it looked like L.J. Scott, first of all, made Connor Cook look small, which I thought was kind of impressive. And then the other thing was that he showed a burst that I don't think either of the other guys had, and sort of an ability to move a pile that the other two guys didn't have either. I think that he's got to get better in pass protection. They trusted him in pass protection a couple times against Western, actually, but so long as he can hang in there, I think he's going to pull away over time, just because the physical tools that he has just outpace the other two. But that's not to take anything away from Andre London and Gerald Holmes. Those guys are really good too. I mean, for him to be 233 pounds and run as fast as he did, it's scary and exciting, but I think we'll see a lot of him. So to answer your original question that I deflected back with another question, my biggest takeaway from the game was the play calling with the defensive secondary. There's a lot less jamming at the line. They're playing a lot more off of guys. So you saw a lot of plays where Demetrius Cox was maybe 7 or 8 yards downfield, and there was a hitch that got caught 5 or 6 yards down the field. Those are things that didn't really happen in 2012 and 2013, and for much of 2014. So it seems like the play calling and the way that those corners are playing is going to be a little more conservative than usual, and you saw that in the stats too. There weren't any, or not many at least, big offensive plays in the passing game, but what Zach Terrell, I think is how you pronounce it. It's not Terrell like Terrellins, it's Terrell. What Zach Terrell was able to do was sort of get balls into the seam, and then MSU kind of corralled guys. So it seems to me like they're kind of playing towards the offense. Like they realize that so long as they don't allow some big plays, that the offense is going to be able to score a lot of points.
Well, I think part of that too is playing to your personnel. I mean, you've got Copeland. That was his first game. I mean, he's a redshirt freshman. That's his first game. Deontay Copeland at corner. Cox is fully a cornerback for the first time, and you had a new secondary. You've got, like we talked about in the weeks leading up, you've got inexperienced guys, and I don't think they trust them to completely leave them on islands like previous players had. I think that's the smart way to play. Big plays were a problem last year for this defense, and I would not be surprised if the defensive play calling is geared toward a little bit more bend but don't break. And part of that too is because of what you've got on the defensive line. You can trust if you let your guys try to cover. I mean, I'm not saying play way off, but you don't need to maybe get as fancy when you have a defensive line like they do. How many sacks they get? I mean, Riley Bulla had 3 as a blitzing linebacker.
They had 7 total.
7 total. I mean, Cooper won, Heath won, Calhoun won, McDowell won. Those are all 4 defensive linemen right there. And then the 3 from Bulla, who did a good job of reading the QB and then getting in there when the D line started to move the pocket a bit. I was going to go back to the running backs. What do you? There were a couple of people afterward that said L.J. Scott's the next Le'Veon Bell, and I didn't see that, and I said I didn't say that, and I didn't mean that in any sort of disrespect. I just think they're 2 different kinds of players. Scott's the big guy who can move a pile and tries to move a pile. Le'Veon Bell never was never the guy to run over guys. He was shifty. He had the quick feet. He was balanced. That's why he was able to carry the load that he was, because he never took on a straight on direct hit. He wasn't trying to bulldoze guys like I think Scott is doing a little bit more. I mean, this ain't TJ Duckett we're talking about, but a little different style of players. What do you think?
Yeah, well, I think that when Le'Veon Bell was a freshman in 2010, he did a little more of the bulldozing thing. I think as he sort of came into his own as a running back, you're right, it's a little bit more Eddie Lacy or Joique Bell type, shifty big back at the same time. So guys who are hard to bring down. And then once he got to the NFL, Le'Veon Bell lost a lot of weight and became sort of a straightforward running back, I think. But he was much bigger at MSU, and it was, at least when he was a freshman, I think he was really trying hard to just kind of bulldoze people. So I don't know. Yeah, it seems like LJ Scott is a little bit more of have guys bounce off of him type player. I don't know what he looks like catching balls out of the backfield. Le'Veon Bell was really good at that. Connor Cook actually struggles a little bit to throw the ball to guys in the flat, but yeah, I mean, it'll take time to figure out exactly who he is. It seemed to me like all those running backs were just kind of trying to hit holes as hard as they could right from the get-go. So
yeah, you mentioned throwing to the backs. Only Gerald Holmes had a catch among backs, and that was for 0 yards. And yeah, that hasn't been one of Cook's strengths. I think Kirk Cousins was very good at those kinds of throws, and then the bubble screen type of throws too. He had a bit of a stronger arm and a quicker release. Cook seems to have a bit more touch, and you don't see the bubble screens anymore like you used to.
Which is sad for me. But the thing is, so the idea is that you want to horizontally stretch the defense. So bubble screens were one way of doing that, but I think that
they've replaced it with the R.J. Shelton jet sweeps too.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think it's just a much better play overall because it's higher percentage. Like there's very little chance of turnover in those situations unless Shelton fumbles the ball, which he did against Western.
He did. That was an interesting sequence of events there.
Yeah. So I mean, Cook doesn't really have to make those throws very often like Hoyer and Cousins did.
Yeah.
When Treadwell was offensive coordinator. But.
So with Cook, he finishes 15 to 31, 256 yards, 2 TDs, no picks. Completion percentage-wise, it's not very good. But I thought the receivers, I thought that was more on Cook than it was on the receivers. There were a couple drops in there, but there were also a number of very tough catches made. Aaron Burbridge, 4 catches, 117 yards, had a couple down the sidelines, the jump ball, back shoulder type of plays. Josiah Price had 3 of the tight end. D'Anthony Arnett gets a touchdown. What'd you think of Cook's performance?
I thought it was uneven, but it was sort of like everything else in this game where, again, once it got out to 34 to 10, they just kind of packed it in. So, yeah, I mean, Cook seems to try to make the perfect throw every time. And while that's can be spectacular, and we saw that a few times, especially with Burbridge, at other times it's just too tough. I mean, there was a touch or an end zone throw to McGarrett Kings that he narrowly missed, but it was just a tough throw, and also would have been an extreme catch by McGarrett Kings. So it seems like he's just trying to fit the ball into these tight windows that maybe if he was a little more patient with the ball, he could find more open guys. But maybe it was suggested in the comments in my 5 Factors article that the receivers weren't doing a very good job of getting separation. And I could see that to some extent. I mean, I think Josiah Price did a pretty good job, but outside of Price, it seemed like there was some difficulty in getting separation from the Western corners.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to tell on the broadcast just how much they are or aren't. But yeah, you mentioned the 5 Factors. That's a good piece if anybody hasn't read it. Last thing on this, the kickoff coverage. Western gets a big return on one. They get a touchdown on the next. Cause for concern, or do you think? I mean, was this MSU missing blocks? I missed the beginning of the game. I watched the return touchdown on my phone, so I couldn't really tell. What did you take away from those kick returns?
I'm not going to take away much from those. I think that ultimately, so last year in Bill Connolly's kick coverage metric, MSU ranked 15th nationally over the last in all of 2014. So they were a pretty solid unit in 2014. I think the last time that MSU gave up a kick return touchdown before this game was in 2011 to Penn State. So it had been a while. And I one of the other interesting things is the number of starters who play on that kick return coverage unit. I mean, Viante Copeland is the guy who made the tackle at the end of the opening kick return that went pretty far. And then Demetrius Cox is the guy who missed the tackle on the touchdown return. So it's kind of interesting to see how many starters actually play on this unit, and you wonder, it just didn't seem like their head was really fully in the game, as horrible a cliche as that is. But yeah, to me, it just seemed like a lack of concentration on those kick returns, that guys had opportunities to make the tackles and they just kind of didn't.
Yeah, the fact that you had two, I think, is concerning, and it will be interesting to see how that happens with Oregon. So wrapping up Western here, as the game kind of went along, I kept kind of going back and forth on if I thought Western was good or not. I mean, they won 8 games last year, up from 1-11 the year prior. And in the end, I think Corey Davis is going to win them a lot of games just on his own. Him and Braverman, the receivers, with Terrell, who's a decent QB. Those guys, Davis is so talented. They're going to be a pretty good team, and I think that's something to keep in mind. And, MSU has these games where they get up big and then they have a bad fourth quarter and the final score isn't good. And teams are kind of rusty early under D'Antonio, so that takes us off to Oregon and College Game Day and a almost top 5 matchup. I think a top 6 matchup. I think they're both in. MSU went to Eugene last year, fell. But D'Antonio made a point this week to say that, for all the hype and everything going into this game, it's not the end game. They lost to Oregon last year and were right back up in the playoff mix going into the Ohio State game last year, and it's kind of what the playoff thing does. You can lose a game, especially early, and make your way back in. Just look at Ohio State. So I guess, Joe, as we kind of look into this game here, to start off, how big is it? I mean, it's big from a national perception standpoint, certainly, but what are your feelings going into this one?
So, yeah, I mean, you mentioned the playoff thing. I mean, if you have to pick one game, you'd pick to win the Ohio State game, but there's still, as crazy as it sounds, there's still some outside chance that a one-loss MSU team that loses to Ohio State, and assuming Ohio State is an undefeated team and wins the Big Ten at that point, there's an outside chance that an 11-1 MSU team could sneak into the playoff. Crazy things would have to happen elsewhere, but
I'll say I've seen a lot of people say that. I will say I don't think there's a good chance that there's a lot of factors that go into that, and it depends. But I just think if MSU were to lose their second to last game, I just feel like people would still be too down on them. But they would have to go they would have Penn State the next week. Who knows where they're at? A lot of factors go into. I just think it's very, very unlikely that that MSU loses to Ohio State and still makes the playoffs. That's just my opinion.
No, I agree completely. I mean, I think it's a remote shot, but it's still a shot, right? So the winning this game isn't just sort of for national perception at that point. I think it's a little more than that, just because I think it does have playoff implications in the case where things get a little crazy at the end of the year. If it would be hard to have another 2007, which was the craziest year, but there's still some shot that the winner of this game doesn't win their conference and makes the playoff anyways. But yeah, I mean, this is, what, the third time that it's been a matchup of two top 10 teams in Spartan Stadium since the game of the century, right? So,
Oh, is it? What were the other ones?
or no, I think this is the third matchup of top 10 teams for MSU since the game of the century. So I think it was the
We got the Oregon game last year.
okay, so no, that's not right. Because then the Baylor game would have been one as well.
Yeah, keep thinking. I'm gonna try to pull up the game notes and see what's in here.
It's was Ohio State in the top 10 last year?
Okay, it's the first AP top 10 game in Spartan Stadium since the game of the century.
Okay, cool.
And
For both
yeah,
both
that's solid. That's all it says.
So anyways, that's a big deal, right? I mean, that doesn't happen all the time. It's been 50 years almost since that happened. So yeah, I mean, it's a huge deal to win a game like this. I think would the Big Ten is still sort of fighting an uphill battle in terms of perception. I think overall, especially after Penn State lost to Temple last week, which was not helpful. So yeah, I think there's plenty on the line there. And also just kind of measuring up, as D'Antonio will say, just to kind of see where you're at. It's with D'Antonio, it's been sort of a pretty smooth climb with few setbacks, right? There was, in 2009 there was a slight setback with being under 500. In 2012 there was a setback going 6-6, and I think in 2014 was a very slight step back from 2013 even. So it'll be interesting to see if sort of the smooth upward ascent can continue, and I think that this game against Oregon is sort of the first example of that.
Yeah, we opened talking about this game by talking about how not important we think it is.
It's always a good way to generate interest. Yeah.
That'll get the people fired up. I look at this like I look at this game like I look at a lot of D'Antonio's kind of become Tom Izzo in the sense that his teams get better as the year goes on. I mean, 2013 they looked awful. They lose to Notre Dame by the end of the Rose Bowl chance. Last year they lose to Oregon. They get better as the year goes on. They beat Baylor by the end of it, and so he's got a track record of getting better, which is a good thing. But you win a game like this. This is another one of those respect games. Beating Baylor was good. Beating Stanford was good. Beating Ohio State that year. I mean, she's got plenty of respect. I just think that they came into this year as a top 5 team that nobody was talking about. Really, no one was really talking about, because everyone's assuming Ohio State's going to win, and not that there's anything wrong with them. I think if MSU wins this game, people will start looking at Ohio State a little bit different too. And all of a sudden, that MSU Ohio State game, people are like, oh, that's going to be a big game at the end of the year. But if MSU beats Oregon, people are like, okay, we need that game now. So this is another one of those opportunities to take a step up nationally in perception. I think Oregon's already there. They've made 2 national title games. They beat MSU last year. I think Oregon's at that level. I think MSU's still trying to get to that level in terms of consistent, not just respect, but being talked about. And I guess as we kind of break down this game, what do you think? I mean, you got 2 teams who probably aren't feeling very good about their defenses, but are feeling very good about their offenses. Do you see anybody stopping anybody?
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be that's the question, right? I think it's going to be a shootout. So the one interesting thing that we should mention is that in week 1, Oregon beat Eastern Washington 61-42. So that 42 number that Eastern Washington put up was pretty interesting, although they scored quite a few points on Pac-12 opponents before.
Right, that's a very good
50 points against Washington.
Right, that's a very good team, a very good offensive team, although some of that recently had been with Vernon Adams at quarterback. So, but still, it's I mean, this ain't like a crappy FCS team. It's a good team, especially offensively. But it's a hell of a lot of points to give up too. Yeah,
and I think the biggest thing that I took away from rewatching that Oregon game from last year was that the MSU offense is still pretty inconsistent. We saw that against Western as well. there are times when the offense moves down the field with no issue, and then there are other times where it stalls out pretty quickly. And so in that Oregon game, they scored 24 points in the second quarter and then only scored 3 points the entire second half. And there were a number of times where they had the ball up 27-18 with the possibility of really extending that lead and kind of breaking the game open the other way, and were unable to. So that to me is the biggest thing. I think that MSU is going to kind of move the ball at will, so long as Connor Cook wants to, like they did against Western. Oregon replaces 3/4 of their secondary. So Ifo Ekpre-Olomu is gone. Hill, who actually had a great game against MSU last year that I did not notice, is gone as well. And then the guy who made the first pick on Cook is gone as well. So that's 3/4 of their starting secondary is gone, which I thought was really interesting. The game notes for on the offensive end, there's some turnover as well. But yeah, I think ultimately I think the offensive line should be able to create some room for whatever running back team you're on, and Connor Cook should be able to find guys in the secondary, find receivers going downfield, just because the secondary is largely brand new.
Right. But the question then becomes is MSU's defense, and I thought what you saw from MSU against Western was very worrisome if you're an MSU fan, in that they were consistently getting beat in the seams and on the edges. And that's exactly where Oregon's going to get you. Darian Harris, Riley Bulla did not do well in pass coverage. And if MSU is going to play a 3-linebacker set against Oregon, they're going to be asked to get some pretty fast guys. Same with the safety. And that was where a lot of the problems came last year between the linebackers and the safeties.
They started Mylon Hicks last year at Star against Oregon, which was interesting too.
So
not Darian Harris, but
right, and they say Harris is fast. I think they said they've clocked him at a 4.5 or something like that. But he is not fit, I don't think, for the pass coverage. I think if you're looking at passing down situations against Oregon, I really think they should bring in. I heard an interesting idea to move Cox into that hybrid role and play Darian Hicks or whoever you think your best corner remaining is at the starting corner, and kind of play kind of like a 4-2-5 instead of a 4-3. In passing situations, MSU often goes with a 3-3-5. So I mean, that's another thing. I just don't think they're regular type of deformations. I don't think you can trust Harris and Bulla in pass coverage very much in a game like this.
Right. So one thing is that Oregon also lost 3 of their starting 5 offensive linemen, and that offensive line got battered by MSU's defensive line last year as well. Mariota was able to sort of conjure something out of nothing on a number of occasions, but I don't think that Vernon Adams is going to be that guy. I think Vernon Adams will be, competent, but I just don't think he's going to be a Heisman winning quarterback like Mariota. So to me, that's the biggest thing. I think really just the step down from Mariota to Adams. There was talk of Adams not really knowing the playbook yet.
Yeah, I saw Trevor Mondage said that on SportsCenter today, that he heard or something that Adams doesn't know the playbook well. I mean, I'm not going to say he's obviously not going to be Mariota level, but he did join. I mean, he joined the program 3 weeks ago. I mean, he had the playbook since spring, but there is that adjustment period. But at the same time, this offense is a lot of reads. It's not humongous playbook, reading so much stuff pre-snap, during the snap. It's just reading, reading an end, reading a linebacker, reading a players as the play is progressing. So I don't know if that's.
Well, and they put up 61 points against Eastern Washington. It's not like, I mean, they're an FCS school or whatever, but still, to put up 61 points is to put up 61 points. And he clearly didn't have much issue against Eastern Washington. So, yeah, I mean, I think he'll be good.
But I will say, it's fair to mention that, he probably knows all the weaknesses of that Eastern Washington defense, considering he played there. But, like I said, a position of Oregon quarterback comes a lot down to athleticism and your ability to read during a play, as opposed to not, because you're not getting in a huddle and calling the play. You don't have to memorize, you don't have to memorize a playbook and get in a huddle and call the play. You're getting it from the sideline. So that takes a lot of that takes a load off the quarterback.
Yeah, and he also appeared to have gotten concussed during that game.
That was another thing. Toward the end? He kind of slid. Guy came in late, helmet to helmet. Looked pretty bad. Looked like he got knocked out pretty bad. Got taken back. Later came back out. Said after the game he was fine.
He's cleared to play.
I haven't seen any reports suggesting otherwise. But sometimes in those situations, it may be a couple days later until you feel those effects. But all signs appear to be go. But it's something worth watching.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think it's that Oregon offense, there's no way it's going to be as good as it was last year. I mean, they've got sort of playmakers all over the place with between Tyner and Freeman and Addison, who was their leading receiver in 2013, but was lost for all of 2014. There's a lot of guys on their offense. One interesting thing, though, from Oregon's game notes was that of the starting 11 for them offensively, only one of their starting 11 in 2015 was the same as in 2014 in game one, which was a receiver named Stanford. So I don't know how much that really means. It's probably just kind of an interesting tidbit more than anything, because ultimately, I mean, a lot of these guys have played a lot, right? Freeman's played a lot. Right. There's a lot of guys on that team that have seen significant time. So, yeah, I mean, their offense will be their offense, but I think what we saw and sort of just made sense to me as I was thinking about it. It does seem to me like they're going to MSU's defense between Harlan Barnett and Mark D'Antonio and Mike Tressel. A big thing that they're going to be doing this year is trying to limit big plays and just kind of get the ball back to the offense, because I think that they realize their offense can sort of outscore a lot of teams, right? They averaged, what was the average scoring last year? I mean, it was number MSU, one in school history.
Yeah, it was about 45 points, school record.
Yeah. So if you're going to be able to outscore teams, you just kind of have to limit those big plays to some extent. And so I think it's probably a pretty solid strategy overall. Yeah,
I mean, in a game like this, you don't want to give up the big plays. That's what killed them last year. But at the same time, they can move down the field pretty quickly. They're going to use tempo. It's not like you're really saving time otherwise. But, the more snaps that they have to do, the more chances they make a mistake if you're going to try to keep them in front of you. I just think they did not play well on the edge against Oregon, and defensive line is vital against that offense. They're going to have to read things properly. And it's going to kind of come down to if the defensive line can assert their will on Oregon, because I don't know if the linebackers or the defensive backs are going to have enough to carry that. So
and making plays in space, I think, too, was...
That was everything. They really struggled to tackle in space. Riley Bulla got shook a couple times. Tackling in space was also a struggle there. Yeah,
and to be fair, Jarvian Franklin for Western is a pretty good player, but if you're struggling to tackle guys from Western, you're definitely going to struggle to tackle guys from Oregon. So that's another big thing. If the defensive line is missing potential sacks like they were last year, that's going to be a pretty significant cause for concern.
Is there anything else you want to talk about this game? You want to get into your prediction?
No, I mean, I think that's it. I think, it's on Connor Cook at this point, which we sort of already knew. But yeah, if he is as good as he can be, I think that this is a MSU's game, even if it turns into a shootout. But if he's inconsistent, or if the defense struggles to stop big plays anyways, even with a modified strategy, then it could be. There's a chance that this could be a game that gets away from MSU again.
That's kind of my thought. I expect a hell of a lot of points. I just think Oregon has the stamina and the experience and the mindset to keep it going. Like MSU can score a ton of points, but it's kind of in spurts. That's kind of what I expect happening. My score prediction is 49-38 for Oregon. I could see both teams actually scoring more too, but yeah, I just think Oregon's just kind of going to have kind of more of a foot on the gas than MSU will be able to, and I think both defenses are going to be not looking good at the end of this.
Yeah, well, and I think a big part of that is just the offenses themselves. I think against other teams, these defenses will probably look a little better. But
yeah, well, yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's going to be a shootout as well. I think that MSU is going to end up being a little bit better in the red zone than they were last year. Last year, there were a couple different times where drives got going and then Cook, threw interceptions. There was a turnover on downs in the fourth quarter and settling for a couple field goals a couple times, whereas essentially every time that Oregon got the ball inside the 40, they scored a touchdown. So, yeah, I'm going to go with MSU 45, Oregon 42.
All right, I was going to say because
field goal makes the difference.
Yeah, when we got the staff predictions coming out later this week, so look for those if you care. MSU looks like favored by 4. Did that open up as pick'em?
Yeah, it did.
Well, that's shifted quite a bit, and usually it's 3 points for the home team. So that's moved quite a bit on MSU.
Yeah, which is interesting. I wonder why that is. It doesn't seem to me like there would be any, big betting interest either way.
Unless they know something more about Vernon Adams than the public does.
Right. I mean, that's the only thing I could think of is that this Vernon Adams stuff is what has moved the line. It got up to 4.5 actually, and has come down since then. So I wonder if people kind of thought that Adams might not be full go, and then once he was announced that he was good to go, that's when the line came back down a little bit. But
so what do you think about College Game Day? Did you see it last? Reese Davis, the host now. Did you see it last week?
I did not. I've been fighting with Comcast.
Yeah, don't even get me started on that.
Yeah,
but I thought it was good. I mean, Reese Davis. He did basketball at College Game Day. Of all the people to replace Fowler, he's the guy most you put in there and you don't miss a switch. I mean, it's pretty much the same. It feels like the same show. Reese Davis is actually going to be calling the game too because Chris Fowler apparently has U.S. Open duties, so there will be no Chris Fowler in East Lansing. But they're going to be set. This is how many times are they coming in 20 after quite a while of having not come. I know they came in 97 for the Michigan game, 99 for the Michigan game, 04 for the Notre Dame game after the hurricane stuff. That was kind of a last second change. 05 for the Penn State game, and then not until 2011 with Wisconsin, the Hail Mary. And they came in 2012 for Ohio State.
They came last year for Ohio State too.
2014 for Ohio State.
Yeah.
So this is 4 times in 5 years. That's pretty good. I mean, that's kind of a testament to the program and the kind of games, especially, there's not a lot of marquee games on a Big Ten schedule now when you look at teams that the rest of the conference. So to get that 4 or 5 years is pretty impressive. It's going to be set up on Munn Field this year, which they hadn't set up there since 2011. because I know in
Mhm.
2012 they did it at Beaumont, which was that was the perfect setup. I thought it was very scenic, it was very tight. That was a really really cool setup. Last year they did not Demfield. No,
Yeah,
yeah,
I think it is
it was
Demfield.
it was Demfield, but it was raining. The grass got torn up. It was really muddy. It's still a good view there. I don't know. I'm curious how it's going to be set up now since they have that band practice field at Munn now. I'm curious how this setup is exactly where it's going to be. I'm not totally sure, but that'll be interesting. But of all the spots, I think Munfield is the most boring, but also the safest, easiest pick for a spot.
Yeah, it makes sense. So I went to College Game Day in 2011, but I didn't go in 2012, and I didn't go last year.
Yeah,
Um,
2011 was Munfield, and that was kind of weird because it was just like in the middle of this open field. So it wasn't like it was just kind of a group of people kind of just in the middle of this field. The other ones where you were kind of tucked in more felt a little more
Intimate.
intimate. That's the word I'm looking for. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, College Game Day. I don't know. The one time I went, it was fun to say that I went, but the thing is that because of all the signs and stuff, you don't actually get to watch College
Yeah,
Game Day.
yeah. I mean, I went last year. I didn't go to the Ohio State game last year, but I did go with my dad because he hadn't been. It's kind of a cool thing to go do, but 4 times in 5 years, I'm curious what the turnout will be.
Right, especially because tailgating becomes sort of a chore afterwards too. If you go to,
Well, especially the night game because you
yeah,
can't. You gotta wait. The 3:30 setup with Ohio State in 2012 was perfect
right.
with all the timing. So yeah, because you go and then even if you're excited, you got it. Well, we can't tailgate yet, and then you got to come back and kind of weird. They should change that for special situations.
Well, and kickoff isn't until like 8:15.
Yeah, 8 o'clock. Yeah, so that's even another hour more than usual. So gonna be a
I'm
long
really,
day. Are
I'm
you
really,
going? Are
yeah,
you going at all?
yeah. I've got season tickets. I'll be there. I'm really interested to see.
Are you going to game day?
No, it's just too much. Like to try to fit it all in one day. Like I need to prep to tailgate, and you got to get to the tailgate lots early because they say that you can't line up to get into the tailgating lots, but that's not true. People do it
Yeah,
like crazy
yeah.
anyways. So, um, yeah, I mean, it's going to be nuts, and I'm really interested to see how the students end up looking in the student section because it is the opening game. So
Oh
people,
yeah, that's
there's
the other
freshmen,
thing.
and the fact that it's going to be so late. I mean, the last time a game was that late, I mean, did they start the Ohio State game at 7 or was that at 8?
I don't know, but I will say this:
Nebraska was crazy.
first game usually gets the best turnout, like of all games, because people are just excited to finally have a home game. Freshmen are going for the first time. First game is probably the best turnout in my experience that I've seen. So that'll be interesting. Now, how do you think on that topic? It looks like the students are wearing green shirts this year. It must be an odd number thing that they've done because 2011 was green and 2013 was green. I think green is just not a good look for uh, for the students because they don't stick out, and especially at a night game, they're going to be wearing dark when it's dark. I don't like it. The white sticks out more. I think the stripe out, if it works, would look great. Although it's going to be on the same day that Tennessee is doing its checker, so it'll get compared to that. Do you trust this stripe to work? I don't because MSU fans struggle to do a whiteout at Breslin. There's just not a lot of people who get white stuff because it
Yeah,
gets dirty easily. Do you think the stripe out is going to work?
well, no. I think part of it too is that the game is so late. So it kind of depends on the weather. I think if the weather is warm and people are, wearing just t-shirts, then it's a lot more likely because, people will be like, okay, I was supposed to be wearing green or I was supposed to be wearing white. But if it gets cold at night at 8:15, people are just going to put on their coats or jackets or whatever.
Right.
So I think that could be, it's something where maybe at the beginning of the game it'll work out and it'll look good, and then as the game goes on, it'll kind of fade.
I think the best whiteout I think that they've done was 2008 Notre Dame, because that was a 3:30 game. But that was the second. It was like second game of the year, third game of the year. Beautiful day. Everybody was warm. It worked out. I don't know if the stripe's going to work when you get later, especially at the 8 o'clock kickoff.
That 2008 Notre Dame game, actually, I have a funny story about. So my friends and I, we painted our chests for that game, and we had an art major on the floor, so we trusted him to pick the paint. But he picked like acrylic paint, so it like dried and cracked, and we got like sunburns in the cracks of the paint. Oh God, it was terrible. But yeah, you're right. I think that whiteout worked because for that reason, it was warm and it was 3:30, and yeah, it worked out. But yeah, it'll be interesting.
If it's like close, you might get some people pressured to do it. I think they've never given out shirts at Breslin, which I think would solve that problem. They're not going to give out shirts here, obviously, but yeah, if it doesn't work, no one's going to really care or notice except for MSU fans. I just find it doubtful with a late kick and with MSU fans' history trying to pull off these things. It's just not something they do. It's just not Penn State where they know to all wear white, and it's just their thing. They don't do it. Nothing wrong with that. I just don't have. I don't just think it's gonna work. So I'm picking against MSU, and I'm picking against the fans.
You're such a pessimist, Chris. Yeah, I don't know. I think you're right to some extent. I think it'll be okay. Yeah, I mean, actually, I'm not sure even what color I'm supposed to wear. I should look that up right now.
Yeah, evens and odds, which is interesting because the way they do the sections is that the middle of the section is the aisle way. So it's not like you're going to have people in the same sections. There's going to be a divider in each section, basically, where you're going to go from green to white. So
that's going to be confusing.
That might confuse some people. Well, I'm in this section, but again, we're being nitpicky. I think I would be more annoyed that the student section is wearing green because dark just never works.
Yeah, I'm a green section, but it does say it on the ticket, right? On the ticket, it is kind of subtle, but it says even section wear green.
Oh, it does?
Odd section wear white. Yeah, but it's subtle. It's like, relatively small font on either side of the ticket itself. So if you were paying a lot of attention, you'd notice it, but you might not. There's a lot of random print, it seems like, on this ticket. So.
Well, and if you get a StubHub type ticket, you're not going to either. What are the tickets going for now? I decided a few weeks ago that I wasn't going to have the time or money to go. What are the?
I have no idea, actually.
Last I'd seen, they were in the 160s still, and that was for the Oregon section, basically. Although there were some students getting lower bowl. No, these are Oregon. Oregon sections are about 120. Student section 120. You can sell student sections on here now. How does this work? Because you can't. Now don't they not? I guess you might not know, but they no longer let you just use somebody else's ID.
I don't know. I've never had an issue with that. But it's been a couple years. So.
They would just swipe the ID. Now they apparently check your thing and everything. At least when my brother was in there a couple years ago. Yeah, it's looking like one non-student section. It's looking like 130. A lot of single, and these are all single tickets.
Yeah. Well, I'm interested too to see what the Oregon section looks like.
Yeah,
in this green and white striped stadium.
Yeah, they'll probably. I think they'd probably wear some yellow or something. That's kind of dumb that the student section tickets are on here because it really makes going through StubHub a hell of a lot more difficult. Not to mention, you've got people listing rows and seats when it's first come first serve. I don't know. We should probably wrap this up. So we did the scores, talked about everything. I wanted to just plug. I wrote MSU's opponent in 2 weeks is Central Michigan, and I wrote a story. I followed the Central Michigan coach John Bonamego, former Lions special teams coordinator. Followed him around for the day for his head coaching debut last week. He had a cancer battle this offseason, so wrote on that on coachingsearch.com. You can check that out. Had a lot of fun writing it and give you an inside look at the coach MSU will be going up against in a couple weeks when Central comes to East Lansing. I tell you what, Central looked pretty good in that game. They're not projected to do very well at all, but they could have beaten. I don't know if you watched it all, but they could have beaten Oklahoma State if not for some red zone mistakes and then some third down mistakes in the fourth quarter. But
like I said, I've been fighting with podcast.
Yeah, I don't think they'll be close with MSU, but just for that program, I think they're heading in the right direction. Yeah, Comcast. Yeah. I don't even want to. I've had my own issues for 2 weeks on that, so I don't want to say anything I'm going to regret on here. So,
I can't confirm or deny what Central looked like in that game, but I can confirm that the article was really good. So, definitely go take a look at it.
Well, thank you. So yeah, follow. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, RSS. Check out theonlycolors.com always for some great stuff throughout the week. Got a bigger staff now, a lot of good stuff going up. Participate in the live threads. Those are always fun. Got a good community of readers. Follow on Twitter at @theonlycolors, and we will talk to you guys next week, I guess. So you good, Joe?
Yep, I'm good.
All right, man. Guys, see you.
Thanks.